Ian Brady, Britain's notorious child killer, sadist, psychopath, and longest-serving prisoner. The abhorrent crimes he committed with accomplice Myra Hindley in the 1960s shocked the nation. This is a story of his attempts to manipulate and control throughout nearly half a century of incarceration and psychiatric confinement. Told by those who know and work with him, many of them talking for the first time. You're one of the very few people he trusts.
Possibly. People try and get into his head. You won't get into his head.
You feel yourself in the presence of a human being who isn't really quite human.
One by one, their bodies were found, all except Keith Bennett.
Now 74 and brought close to death by a recent illness, Brady sent a letter which suggested he was about to reveal the secret he has held since the murders.
A simple prayer from Keith Bennett's mother. Please find my son's body.
The burial site of Keith Bennett.
I received a letter. Within the sealed envelope is a letter to Winnie Johnson. That is the means to her possibly being able to rest.
Is this a genuine gesture to help a grieving family, knowing that Winnie Johnson was nearing the end of her life, or one more cruel game to assert power and satisfy his sadistic nature?
You see, he's still got that bit of power to keep taunting the families and taunting Winnie Johnson.
I had been making a film about Ian Brady's 13-year hunger strike, his battle to stop being force-fed by psychiatric authorities and return to prison. I'd come to a hotel outside Liverpool to meet his mental health advocate when events took an unexpected turn.
Paddy.
What's happened?
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. You just got to give me time. I'm coming to the hotel. I'll be there in about an hour and a half.
Is it a very serious situation, though?
Extremely serious, as far as all executors are being called, power of attorneys are being called. But I'm not going to talk to you anymore on the phone, Paddy. I'm really not.
We'll see you in about an hour and a half, OK?
All right, Paddy.
All right, bye.
Good afternoon. Moore's murderer Ian Brady has been taken to hospital after reportedly suffering a seizure. The 74-year-old child serial killer was due to...
Ian Brady had collapsed in his high-secure psychiatric ward and been rushed to hospital.
Conditions, save for that his legal team have told me in the last 10 minutes that he is very, very unwell.
I had a phone call at approximately 3 o'clock to say that he was foaming around the mouth, he couldn't swallow, and that he was jerking in the chair. They brought in a defibrillator and they started defibrillating. They then took him to Fazakerley Hospital.
As his advocate, Jackie's a key figure in Brady's life, expressing his wishes and instructions. In the 15 years she's worked with him, she's become familiar with the scale of activity that accompanies his every move. Do you feel there's a disproportionate amount of resources going into Ian Brady's case where other people are lacking?
Well, there's a humongous amount of security to transport a 74-year-old man from A to B. Obviously, he has to go in an ambulance, but does he need armed response? And does he need helicopters? When there's other people that leave prison, leave hospital with nothing at all.
News has spread of Brady's condition, and Jackie soon becomes the focus of constant media interest.
Hello? Well, nobody knows what the matter is at the moment. Are you the lady I spoke to from Sky before? I wouldn't be able to do an interview today. I'm absolutely up to my eyes. Oh, for God's sake. Hello?
Decades on from his crimes, Brady continues to provoke intense fascination. What possible motivation could he have had for inflicting such unimaginable suffering? Child murders, that he later described as an existential exercise. Crimes that had their genesis in an apparently innocent relationship.
Brady appeared to be a striking personality, riding around on a motorbike, the man from nowhere who knew deep thoughts, who read books even, who could philosophize. He decided that he would prove to her that he could do something that was superhuman, take a life, because there is nothing more absolute in terms of exercising power over other people than taking their lives. He wasn't out to demonstrate he was physically powerful, but mentally powerful. And to cold-bloodedly pick up a child, abduct that child, kill that child sadistically, and then anonymously bury it in a place like the Moors, demonstrated a powerful mind that would make an impression on the girl that apparently was infatuated with him.
October 1965. Acting on a tip-off, police discovered the body of 17-year-old Edward Evans at 16 Wardlebrook Avenue. He had been bludgeoned with an axe and strangled. A few days later, they recovered the bodies of 2 children from Saddleworth Moor. First, Leslie Ann Downey, who disappeared from a Manchester fairground 2 years previously. She had been raped and strangled.
I mean, I was 15 at the time. I remember myself, my mum, my dad, went on to where the fairground was and just going down, just shouting her name out. Yeah, oh, I do remember. Yeah, even though it was a long time ago.
But even up to them finding Leslie, I still had hope that she was alive, because I didn't think anyone had harmed her, you know.
Days later, the body of 12-year-old John Kilbride was found. He too had been sexually assaulted and strangled.
I just couldn't see him going away with anyone. He wasn't the kind of boy who would leave home for any reason.
On the 6th of May, 1966, just 6 months after the abolition of the death penalty, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were each sentenced to life imprisonment. For the families of the victims, time has stood still ever since.
There's no words to express what the feeling is. You couldn't understand what the feeling is. You know, the anger what's there, and plus the passion for your brother, you know, and for the other little ones, what happened. And you just can't understand it. You can't get your head round why.
This picture here, when was that taken?
That was taken, it's got to be 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just after John has gone missing. That. And then this chair here was where John sat. Always stayed like that until the day where they found John. Because we always thought he was coming back.
How long was it after he went missing that he was found?
2 years. 2 years after. Which is a long, long time when you're remembering your brother and you don't know where the hell he is. You know, a long, long time.
Brady and Hindley carried out the murders periodically over 2 years. During that time, they would frequently revisit and photograph each other at the grave sites of their victims. Following Brady's arrest, police discovered these macabre trophies and other mementos. A tape recording and photographs of Lesley Ann Downey in her last moments. And Brady's cryptic ledger, a coldly precise list of actions to carry out the perfect murder.
Like Lesley was found on the moors at the back where we lived. When they actually found her, I just remember going to in our house, and me and Mum had to go out to identify her. And we're just waiting, you know, waiting to hear all the family was back at the house. I just remember her coming in and just, you know, just nodding, saying, yeah, it was Les, you know. I can't imagine what my mum had gone through, you know, with what she had to see, what she had to hear. No, she always kept things to herself, my mum, you know. She wouldn't tell me anything, like, including what was on them tapes, and no, she just kept that to herself. She didn't want us to know. I wouldn't want to know.
People would talk of these crimes as being senseless, and they don't make any sense to normal people because they're driven by the impulse to control and hurt other people, which is the fundamental abnormality in sadism.
Many of the aspects of the killing don't just involve physical harm. The actual enjoyment and pleasure of terror in the victim, as well as the sort of the destruction of them both physically and also sort of psychologically, is a key component, and one which the individual finds enormously pleasurable.
How many more that we don't know about? How many more has he got up his sleeve that he's not said anything about? Nobody knows, did he?
The consequences of Brady's crimes would not end with his imprisonment. Nearly 50 years on, he still attempts to exert power and control over the families of his victims.
He'll never die until he's dead. When he heard about this seizure that he had, I thought that might be it. Maybe then we can get on with our lives properly then. But they're ruining the wreck now as it is.
Murderer Ian Brady has been returned to Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital after undergoing medical...
Ian Brady was returned to Ashworth in a serious condition. The 2 broken vertebrae he had suffered in his seizure mean he cannot be force-fed for the first time since he began his hunger strike nearly 13 years ago. Jackie Powell is on her way to see him. Besides his solicitor, she is the only person who has permission to visit him.
How has he managed to keep up the determination to refuse food?
He has a very strong will. He has extremely strong will. He doesn't speak to his care team, his clinicians, psychologists, social workers. He said he feels as if he's dead, as settled in a grave.
Brady has spent the last 27 years of his sentence sectioned in Ashworth High Secure Hospital, an institution for which he has developed a deep antipathy. Jackie was appointed Brady's advocate under the Mental Health Act in 1999.
what makes that such a lasting relationship?
I suppose because, unlike most people, I'm not interested in what happened 50 years ago. And I've never questioned him about his index offences. It's up to him whether he discusses them. I never question him over them.
And you feel his rights are important?
Well, I feel everybody's rights are important, yes. And many would say that that shouldn't be the case, but I feel every human being, whoever they are, should be treated with some amount of respect and dignity.
With her long-standing proximity to Brady, Jackie was uniquely placed to offer an insight into his psychopathy, now directed towards the institution he loathes.
Ashworth operates on what I've termed the crematorium principle. Extensive landscaped grounds, decorative trees and shrubs, designed exclusively to impress visitors and divert their attention from the smoky installations and the absence of human life. In short, Ashworth is merely an open grave for patients, or more accurately, a concrete tomb. So that's how he was feeling then.
How would you characterise his relationship with Ashworth?
He has no relationship with Ashworth. Any relationship has completely broken down in 1999.
Ian Brady stopped eating at the end of last month because he was angry that he'd been transferred to a new ward from a part of the hospital he'd been in for 4 years.
At the end of 1999, Brady began the hunger strike that has lasted to this day.
Mr. Justice Kay told Ian Brady that if he continues the hunger strike, the high-security mental hospital where he's held has the right to continue to force-feed him.
Brady has not eaten for nearly 13 years. To keep him alive, he has been force-fed a high-calorific liquid through a nasal gastric tube. I wanted to understand what motivates Brady's behaviour. Has anybody been able to comprehend the nature of the forces that drive him? I went to meet the man who has represented him longer than any other. The eminent civil rights lawyer, Benedict Bernberg. What was he like to work with?
Very difficult. He's an extremely difficult person. He's a man with a terrific built-up sense of anger inside him, and that's very often kept him going over the years. Anger directed at various things and people. Institutions, of course, like the prison and the hospital, newspapers, doctors, even solicitors and so on. You know, it boils up in him, and that's part of his pathology.
According to the logic of that pathology, by committing the murders, Brady proved to himself that he was above morality. And even after imprisonment, Hindley remained faithful to him and his ideal.
Brady created this killing cult that was a cult of two. He had sunk everything into proving what a powerful personality he was. This was his cocoon, his little world, a demented mind that could apparently see clearly, that had constructed a reality to make sense of his existence. It was a perverse existence, of course, and innocent children paid the price.
Despite their separation, the bond remained powerful. Brady staged the first of many hunger strikes after he was denied conjugal visits in 1970.
He seemed to believe that he was in spiritual communication with Myra Hindley. This then became a part of his initial battle, that he inappropriately was insisting on having visits with Myra Hindley, and he went on hunger strike to try and achieve that.
It was a union that provided an outlet for Brady's sadistic urges. But ultimately, the possibility of freedom became more important to Myra Hindley. In May 1972, she wrote to him, breaking off their relationship.
She betrayed him by denying the sanctity of that cult that they had, namely that they had killed children.
For Brady, it was more than the loss of a relationship. It was the destruction of the preeminent symbol of his powers.
The nature of the hunger strikes and his demands seem to become more bizarre, and also the nature of his preoccupation with starvation and food became increasingly bizarre. Things like putting very large amounts of salt on his food so he vomited. So his mental state deteriorated very severely, and he appeared to be starving himself to death, not any longer in a protest, but on the basis of very bizarre beliefs. I think the battle, what we're talking about, this battle with authority, it's not a battle with authority, it's a battle in his mind with himself.
Over the course of the 1970s, Brady's mental condition deteriorated towards psychosis. But he was to find an ally in the prison reformer Lord Longford, who famously became involved with the Moors murderers and agitated for Brady's transfer to psychiatric care.
You visited Brady quite recently. How would you sum up his condition?
Well, I'm not a medical man, but I've never seen anybody who looked quite so ill.
By that time, Brady had been in prison for 18 years, mainly in solitary confinement.
He looks like a skeleton. There is a mental factor there.
It was Lord Longford who introduced Brady to Benedict Bernberg. Despite the onset of mental illness, Brady's need for control compelled him to fight countless legal campaigns.
I've never come across anyone, any prisoner, who's such an inveterate litigator as Ian Brady. He had running battles with authority throughout his time, right up to now, in fact. He's an inveterate campaigner.
As pressure mounted for his transfer to a special hospital, a journalist, Fred Harrison, started visiting him in prison.
At the time I was seeing him, he was still tormented as an individual, not by the guilt of what he had done, but by the whole history of what became the personality of Ian Brady.
At the same time, Longford was spearheading a highly public campaign for Hindley's parole.
A good many people have come to know and like her very much, so I should say she was completely ready. She has been for years, if it comes to that.
Brady knew that was a fake, that it was a show for the sake of people like Lord Longford. It left him angry, and he wanted to do anything he could, assuming he could, to block her getting out. And so I believe that part of his motivation was that by feeding me enough information about her complicity, that would damage her prospects of securing parole.
Police have now been searching these moors for a week without success, and Chief Superintendent Topping said...
1986, Fred Harrison's revelations cause a sensation. In an attempt to salvage her bid for parole, Hindley confessed to her involvement in other murders and assists the police in their search for bodies.
Myra Hindley pointed police towards Shining Brook, about 2 miles from where victims Leslie Ann Downey and John Kilbride were buried.
The body of 16-year-old Pauline Reed, missing for over 2 decades, was found the following year.
What you must appreciate is we've recovered a body that's been in the ground for a long time. The body is well preserved.
For Brady, choosing to reveal details to Fred Harrison was more than just revenge on Hindley. It was a chance for him to gain omnipotence over the macabre crimes that he once described as an existential exercise.
The world was as it was and as he had established it, and the order was being upset by Myra Hindley. He re-established control over that world and her life as well.
A high-speed convoy took Ian Brady into the outside world for the first time in 21 years this morning, collecting him at dawn from his Merseyside mental hospital.
Some months later, Brady announced to police he would assist their search for his undiscovered victim, Keith Bennett.
He sounded on the phone very confident, self-assertive and so on, and something which is quite new to me.
Once on the moor, police observed Brady walking purposefully in a specific direction. But then he claimed to be disorientated and confused by changes to the landscape. Keith Bennett's body remained unfound.
Withholding the information as to where bodies might be buried is an enormously pleasurable sense of control for somebody who is obsessed with control.
No site was found. After 11 hours on the moor, Brady was led back to a Range Rover.
Malcolm McCulloch, the psychiatrist who treated Brady in the 1980s, suggested that he may have had another motive for assisting the police.
It's just possible that Ian Brady was on the moor and checked the site without letting on, as it were. Final control is the possession of the body. I know, you don't know, you want to know, and I'm not going to tell you.
He knows. You see, he's still got that bit of power, hasn't he? That bit of power to keep taunting the families. And while he's still got that, he thinks he's in charge, doesn't he?
July 2012. Ian Brady's condition is worsening. Recently, Jackie Powell's role has developed. She is executor to Brady's will, and in light of his precarious health, she's taken on additional legal responsibilities.
All he wanted to do was get on with the power of attorney, make sure all the doctors knew about it.
Power of attorney, what do you mean?
The power of attorney as to whether he gets resuscitated or not.
What's your feeling?
Well, I just feel that he's probably given up the will to fight. He doesn't look as if he's got anything left in him. So the difficulty is with him lying flat on his back and the emphysema, there's a feed coagulating in his lung area and therefore either choking him, drowning him, or him getting pneumonia.
It appears that Brady will end his days within the walls of the institution he loathes. Brady was first moved to Ashworth Hospital in 1985 after developing acute psychotic symptoms, hearing voices and exhibiting delusional behaviour.
I took the view then that anyone who commits crimes of this order really needs psychiatric treatment, because no rational person would commit the crimes that Brady committed.
In the clinical setting of Ashworth, Brady's more extreme psychotic symptoms abated with a regime of medication. But fundamentally, Brady's psychopathy was untreatable.
The interview was, in fact, about a battle of control.
It was more like listening to a monologue than engaging in a conversation.
This was somebody who would manipulate me to his own ends if he could.
After several meetings with him, I was quite glad not to have any further involvement in the case, really.
His new circumstances afforded him greater freedoms. He was able to correspond with the outside world, allowing him to seek an audience less likely to challenge him. Among them, the now retired religious studies teacher, Alan Keithley.
Jesus Christ. I use this, teaching about on evil cause.
Teaching on evil cause?
I did a course on evil from the point of view of philosophy, theology, religion,
and all the other dimensions. And I wrote to Ian Brady, because he's supposed to be the daddy of the devil, the ultimate psychopath. And we had a little correspondence for a bit. And I said, would you like me to come up and talk with you, you say?
But generally you say you wouldn't engage with the clinicians or the psychiatrists at Ashworth?
No, no.
Why not?
Well, he thought they were still sick, you know. I mean, some people are just shallow. And they might have all these qualifications, but, I mean, it wouldn't prepare them at all, I can assure you, for Ian Brady. I mean, he'd been doing it 45 years, and he'd make mincemeat of them. But in the end, he got to just ignore them, you know, waste his time talking to them. You know, they'd read the latest sort of bulletin in the Psychology Today or something. What in hell has that got to do with his life? And of course, you'd have to know Brady, what he would think of that, you know. You were dancing with death.
Brady didn't merely dismiss his psychiatrists. As I would learn, he now claims he manipulated them in order to orchestrate his move to Ashworth. What are all the notes that he's added to this? What's he writing?
These are notations he's made.
I caught sight of a note in Brady's handwriting on a document relating to a mental health tribunal. Is that Stanislavski?
That's exactly right.
He's a method acting teacher. Why is his name in there?
He states that he used this methodology whilst in prison by mimicking other patients whilst he worked on the hospital wing there.
So he faked his diagnosis, he faked his symptoms in order to get moved from prison to hospital?
That's what he's stating, yes, yeah.
Is that something you're familiar with?
It's not something I'm familiar with, but I'm not surprised by it. He's perfectly capable of doing that.
A man like this will want to dupe anybody because he has a psychopathic personality. But I think it's quite difficult to calm people with the symptoms he was manifesting.
Brady's promotion of his grandiose self-image knew no bounds.
I didn't know what to expect, really. He said, how many instruments of murder are in this room? I thought, you're going to kill me. I said, no, I don't know if there are any instruments of murder in this room. It went on from there.
The sinister dimensions of his narcissism were never far from the surface.
He said another very interesting thing during his interview was that he maintained that some of the victims, or two of the victims, the cause of death had not been established. What I felt that he was implying was that actually he had frightened them to death. That actually his ability to be so powerful psychologically meant that the pathologist had been unable to determine the exact cause of death of the child. And what I thought he might be implying was that he was so powerful mentally that he had frightened this child to death.
Brady's pathology had proved untreatable to his